July 6, 1942, Halifax, Nova Scotia. The evening air hung thick and warm, heavy with salt from the harbor just 3 blocks away. Outside the Carlton Hotel, street lamps flickered on, casting yellow pools of light across the sidewalk. That's when Private Marcus Johnson's nose started bleeding. The blood came from a punch he never saw coming. It fell in dark red drops onto his green wool uniform, each drop spreading slowly into the fabric like shame soaking into cloth. The man who hit him wore the same uniform, same green wool, same U.S. Army insignia, same country they both swore to defend. Sergeant William Craddock stood over him, face red with anger, fists still clenched. Big man, Alabama accent, voice like gravel on glass. "This section is whites only," Craddock said. His words cut through the summer air with the certainty of a man who'd never questioned what he believed. Marcus touched his nose. His fingers came away wet. The metallic taste filled his mouth. He'd traveled 3,000 miles to fight Hitler. He loaded ammunition crates 12 hours a day on Halifax docks. His hands had blisters that bled into his gloves. And now his own military police had just beaten him for trying to eat dinner. But that wasn't the worst thing that happened in Halifax that summer. 2 miles offshore at that exact moment, the Atlantic Ocean erupted in violence. Kapitän Lieutenant Friedrich Weber felt his submarine lurch sideways. Another depth charge exploded. The U-754 groaned like a dying animal. Metal screamed, water poured through a crack in the engine room bulkhead. "Abandon ship," Weber shouted in German. His voice barely carried over the sound of destruction. 28 years old, Hamburg-born, U-boat commander, killer of merchant vessels. Now about to die in Canadian waters far from home, fighting a war he'd stopped believing in months ago. The submarine broke surface like a wounded whale. Canadian destroyer HMCS Saguenay bore down on them, guns trained. Weber's hands shook as he climbed through the conning tower hatch. Cold Atlantic air hit his face. Diesel fumes mixed with the smell of his own fear. This was the end. They'd told him what Americans did to prisoners. Torture, starvation, execution. Better to die fighting than face what came next. But Weber didn't know something yet. Neither did Marcus. They were both about to discover the same truth about America from opposite sides of the war. One man was fighting for democracy but denied its most basic dignity. The other was fighting against freedom but about to experience it for the first time. This is the story of how bacon kindness and ordinary Canadians expose both America's greatest shame and its most powerful weapon. This is the story of 2 soldiers, 2 uniforms, and 1 breakfast that changed everything. What these 2 men discovered would transform their lives and prove that the real battle wasn't against each other. It was against hatred itself. And it started with blood on one uniform and seawater on another in the same Canadian harbor on the same summer evening when the world was burning and everything seemed broken beyond repair. But first you need to understand where they came from. Marcus Johnson grew up on the south side of Chicago, where the streets smelled like steel mills and stockyards. His father worked the overnight shift at a meatpacking plant. His mother took in laundry from white families on the north side. They lived in a 3-room apartment with Marcus and his 2 sisters. Baseball saved him. He could throw a fastball that made grown men blink. By age 16, he pitched for a Negro League team on weekends, earning $2 a game. The ball felt right in his hand. The mound felt like the only place in Chicago where Marcus had control over anything. He remembered watching white kids play at the field near Douglas Park. Brand new gloves, clean uniforms, a real dugout with benches. Marcus and his friends played on a dirt lot with bases made from flattened cardboard boxes. But Marcus threw harder than any of those white kids. Everyone knew it. The white kids knew it too. They just never had to face him because the invisible line between their worlds was absolute. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Marcus was 19 years old, working the lunch counter at a diner on 47th Street. The radio crackled with news of burning ships and dead sailors. The customers went quiet. Then someone said, "We're going to war." Marcus enlisted the next morning. Not because he loved a country that told him which water fountains he could drink from. Not because he believed America would fight for his freedom while denying it at home. He enlisted because his mother looked at him with tears in her eyes and said, "Baby, maybe if you serve things will be different when you come back." Maybe. That word carried all his hope. The Army put him in the 88th Engineer Battalion, labor unit, colored troops. They told him he'd build roads and load supply ships. No combat. Black soldiers weren't trusted with rifles, the officers said, but they were trusted with shovels and hammers in 16-hour shifts that left their backs screaming. Marcus brought his baseball glove with him. Worn leather. His father had bought it used in 1938, spent a week's pay on it. The pocket was shaped perfectly to Marcus's hand from 5 years of catches. He packed it in his duffel bag when he shipped out, imagining games on military bases, maybe even playing with white soldiers now that they all wore the same uniform. That dream lasted exactly 3 days. The segregated barracks came first, then the segregated mess halls. Then the water fountains labeled colored and white, even though they were in New Jersey, supposedly the North, where things were supposed to be better. But then came Halifax, May 1942. The 88th Engineer Battalion arrived by train. Marcus stepped onto Canadian soil for the first time and breathed air that smelled like salt and fish and possibility. The harbor stretched out before him, crowded with ships preparing to cross the Atlantic. This was the lifeline to Britain. If these convoys stopped, Hitler won. Marcus's unit worked the docks. They loaded ammunition crates so heavy it took 3 men to lift them. They hauled food supplies and medical equipment and airplane parts. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16. The work was brutal, but something was different here. The first time Marcus walked into a diner on Barrington Street, he froze in the doorway. White Canadian dock workers sat at the counter eating lunch. Marcus waited for someone to tell him to leave, to point to a colored section, to remind him of his place. Instead, the waitress smiled. "Sit anywhere, love. What can I get you?" Marcus sat down, next to a white man who nodded at him, who said, "Long shift at the harbor." "Yes, sir," Marcus said, his voice uncertain. "Me too. The cod chowder's good here." And just like that, Marcus ate lunch next to a white man who treated him like a person. His hand shook, holding the spoon. Not from fear, from something else. Something he couldn't name yet. 2 weeks later, Marcus found a baseball game at a park near Citadel Hill. Canadian dock workers playing pickup. They were short a pitcher. One of them saw Marcus's glove and called out, "Hey, Yank, you any good?" Marcus walked onto that field like a man entering church. He took the mound, wound up, released. The ball cracked into the catcher's mitt with a sound that made everyone stop and stare. "Mother of God," someone said. "Where'd you learn to throw like that?" "Chicago," Marcus said. "South Side." "Well, come on then. Show us what Chicago's got." For 2 hours, Marcus pitched to white Canadian workers who cheered when he struck them out and laughed when they made contact. After the game, they bought him a beer, shook his hand, asked him to come back next Saturday. Marcus walked back to base that evening with tears on his face. He'd just lived something impossible. He'd played baseball with white men who treated him as an equal, who cared about his curveball, not his color. That's when he saw the military police car slow down. Sergeant Craddock sat in the passenger seat watching. Even from 50 feet away, Marcus could see the fury on Craddock's face. The dream started dying that day. Craddock began his campaign to restore order, as he called it, to make sure colored troops knew their place, even in Canada. But Marcus had tasted something. And you can't unknow freedom once you've lived it, even for an afternoon. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles east, Friedrich Weber was learning different lessons. Hamburg, Germany. Friedrich's father was a Lutheran pastor who preached every Sunday about loving your neighbor. His mother taught piano lessons to children in their neighborhood. They lived in a modest house near the Elbe River, where Friedrich spent his childhood watching ships come and go from the port. He joined the Kriegsmarine in 1936, age 22. Not because he believed in Hitler. His father had quietly expressed doubts about the Nazi Party, careful words spoken only in their kitchen when no neighbors could hear. But the Navy offered adventure education away out of Hamburg for a young man who wanted to see the world. U-boat training came in 1939. Friedrich was good at it, calm under pressure, quick with calculations, the kind of officer men trusted in tight spaces under the ocean. They told him Americans were barbarians. That's what the propaganda films showed. America was a nation of mongrels, the instructor said. Mixed races weakening the pure bloodlines. Americans executed prisoners. They ate inferior food. They lived like animals in cities that bred crime and degeneracy. Friedrich believed some of it, questioned parts, but mostly he focused on his job. Keep the submarine running, keep his crew alive, hunt the convoys that fed Britain. By summer 1942, U-754 had sunk 22 Allied ships, freighters mostly, one tanker, each one sent to the bottom with torpedoes that killed men Friedrich never saw. He tried not to think about them, tried to remember they were the enemy feeding Britain's war machine, keeping the fight alive. June turned to July. The hunting grounds shifted to Canadian waters. The convoys gathered in Halifax before the deadly Atlantic crossing. U-754 prowled the approaches waiting. July 6, 1942. Afternoon. A Canadian destroyer caught them on the surface. Depth charges rained down like the fist of God. The first explosion cracked the engine room. The second killed 3 crew members instantly. The third convinced Friedrich that dying underwater was worse than whatever came next. Surface, he ordered. Abandon ship. The U-754 broke through the waves. Canadian sailors swarmed over the conning tower before Friedrich could even think about resistance. His men were exhausted, defeated. 3 dead below. No fight left. The Canadian captain was younger than Friedrich expected, maybe 30. He pointed a pistol at Friedrich's chest, but his eyes showed something other than hatred. "You speak English?" the captain asked. "Yes," Friedrich said. His accent was thick, but the words came. "You're prisoners of war. You'll be treated according to the Geneva Convention." Friedrich didn't believe him. The propaganda had been clear. Americans tortured prisoners. Canadians were just American puppets. This was the beginning of the end. But the Canadian captain did something strange. He offered Friedrich a cigarette. "Long war," the captain said. "Glad you boys decided to surface." Friedrich took the cigarette with shaking hands. It was American tobacco, sweet and strong. The first smoke he'd had in 3 days. They took the Germans to Halifax. The city appeared through the fog like something from a dream. Ships everywhere. Buildings crowding the harbor. The same port Friedrich had been trying to destroy for weeks. Now he was here. Prisoner. Probably about to die. At least it would be on land. The POW processing center occupied a converted warehouse. 200 German prisoners, most from other captured U-boats. They shuffled through medical exams and interrogations in the bureaucracy of captivity. An American Army doctor examined Friedrich. Captain Morrison, his name tag read. Older man, maybe 45. Gentle hands despite his size. "You've got bruising here from the depth charge impact," Morrison said, probing Friedrich's ribs. "Possibly a cracked rib. I'll wrap it." Friedrich stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" Morrison looked up. "You're a human being, and I'm a doctor." Such a simple answer. It made no sense against everything Friedrich had been taught. They fed the prisoners that evening. Friedrich expected bread and water, maybe spoiled vegetables. The kind of treatment Germany gave captured Russians on the Eastern Front. Instead, they brought beef stew. The smell hit Friedrich first. Actual beef. He hadn't smelled real meat in weeks. Submarine rations were tinned fish and hard bread, sometimes moldy. The stew steamed in metal bowls, rich and dark. Friedrich took a bite. Tender beef, soft potatoes, thick gravy seasoned with salt and pepper, an actual apple on the side, coffee hot and strong with real sugar available. He ate slowly, trying to make it last, trying to understand. Around him, other German prisoners did the same. Some cried quietly. Some just stared at their bowls like the food might disappear. "This is better than the Kriegsmarine fed us," someone whispered in German. "Maybe the propaganda was wrong," another voice said. Friedrich thought about his father, about the careful doubts expressed in their Hamburg kitchen, about the questions he'd pushed down for 3 years. What if everything he'd been taught was a lie? That night, lying on a clean cot in the warehouse barracks, Friedrich couldn't sleep. The food sat warm in his belly. The doctor's words echoed in his head. "You're a human being." Tomorrow would bring more questions, more confusion, more cracks in the worldview he'd built his life around. But tonight, Friedrich was just grateful to be alive and confused about what came next. He didn't know yet that in 3 days, a Canadian family would invite him to breakfast, that a woman whose brother died fighting Germany would serve him bacon and eggs. that he'd sit at a table with a black American soldier and discover they had more in common than either had been taught. He didn't know that one meal would shatter everything he believed about enemies and allies, about propaganda and truth, about who deserved dignity and who didn't. All he knew was that the beef stew was good, and the Americans hadn't tortured him, and maybe, just maybe, he'd been lied to about more than he wanted to admit. Sunday morning, July 12th, 1942. The Morrison house sat on Quinpool Road, a modest two-story home with a small backyard. Inside, Helen Morrison stood at her kitchen stove, hands trembling with an emotion she couldn't name. Her husband had asked her to do something impossible. "3 German prisoners are coming to breakfast," Captain James Morrison had said the night before. "I want to show them what we're really about." Helen had stared at him. "Germans killed my brother." "I know. Tommy died at sea, probably a torpedo from one of their submarines." "I know, Helen. And you want me to feed them in our home?" Morrison took her hands. "They're just scared kids. Sailors like Tommy was. Let's show them that Americans are better than their propaganda told them." Helen didn't sleep that night. She thought about Tommy. 23 years old, Canadian Navy. Dead somewhere in the Atlantic, his body never recovered. She'd worn black for 6 months. Now her husband wanted her to cook breakfast for the men who might have killed him. But Sunday morning came. Helen found herself at the stove anyway, cooking. Because her husband was right about one thing: they were supposed to be better. The bacon started first. Thick cut strips from a local butcher maple cured the Canadian way. Helen laid them in her cast iron skillet. The fat began to render, immediately filling the kitchen with that unmistakable smell. Sizzle and pop. The sound of civilization. The sound of Sunday mornings before the war took everything good. Eggs came next. Farm fresh from a neighbor's chickens, yolks bright orange yellow. Helen scrambled them in butter, watching them transform from liquid to fluffy clouds. Toast from bread she'd baked Friday. Fried potatoes cut thin and cooked until the edges crisped. Blueberry preserve she'd put up last summer. Coffee percolating on the back burner, that rich, dark smell mixing with everything else. Her son, Robert, set the table. 16 years old, tall for his age, curious about everything. He'd pestered his father with questions about the German prisoners all week. "Will they speak English?" Robert asked. "Oh, I am," Morrison said. "Enough." "Are they really as bad as the movies say?" "That's what we're going to find out." The doorbell rang at 9 a.m. Helen's hands froze over the skillet. This was it. No turning back now. Morrison opened the door. 3 German sailors stood on the porch, flanked by an American guard. They wore clean clothes provided by the Red Cross. Their faces showed fear and confusion in equal measure. Friedrich Weber was the tallest. 28 years old, though he looked older after 3 years of war. His eyes went immediately to Helen, then to the kitchen beyond, then back to Helen with something like bewilderment. "Come in," Morrison said. "Welcome to our home." The Germans entered slowly, like men walking into a trap they couldn't see yet. The smell of breakfast hit them in waves. Bacon, coffee, toast. The sense of safety and normality in everything they had lost. Friedrich stopped in the kitchen doorway. His hands actually shook. Helen Morrison stood at the stove, her back to them, fork in hand. The bacon strips were almost done, each one curling slightly at the edges, fat rendering into the pan with those small hisses and pops. The percolator bubbled on the back burner. Steam rose from everything. On the table, Helen had laid out abundance. A plate stacked with toast, golden brown and still warm. A butter dish with real butter, yellow and soft. A bowl of scrambled eggs, fluffy and bright. Another bowl of fried potatoes, their edges crispy, steam rising. The preserves, the coffee cups, the cream and sugar. Friedrich's vision blurred. When was the last time he'd seen this much food prepared with care? When was the last time anyone had cooked for him like he mattered? "Sit down," Helen said. Her voice was steady, but Morrison heard the tremor underneath. "Food's ready." They sat. Friedrich, the 2 other German sailors. Robert across from them, eyes wide with curiosity. Morrison at the head of the table. Helen brought the skillet over and plated the bacon. 3 strips on each plate. Thick. Maple cured, still sizzling slightly. Friedrich stared at his plate. The bacon gleamed with fat. The eggs steamed. The potatoes looked like something from a dream of home. He picked up his fork but couldn't make his hand move toward the food. Is it poison? One of the other Germans whispered in their language. Robert heard the tone, if not the words. Sir, if we wanted to kill you, we wouldn't waste good bacon. Friedrich looked up at this 16-year-old boy, saw only honest curiosity, not hatred, not even fear, just a kid who probably missed having interesting people at the breakfast table. He took a bite of bacon. The taste exploded across his tongue. Salty, smoky, that maple sweetness underneath. The fat melted, coating his mouth with richness. The texture was perfect. Crispy outside, chewy inside. Exactly how bacon should be, but never was on a submarine eating tinned rations for months. Friedrich's eyes closed involuntarily. Memory flooded him. Sunday breakfast in Hamburg before the war. His mother making eggs and sausage. His father reading the newspaper. The morning light through their kitchen window. Everything good that the war had destroyed. He was crying. Couldn't help it. Tears ran down his face while he chewed. Helen watched from across the table. She'd prepared herself for many things. Defiance, arrogance, maybe even cruelty. But not this. Not a 28-year-old German U-boat commander weeping over bacon. Her anger cracked. Just a little, but enough. When did you last have a real meal, son? She asked. Friedrich swallowed, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. 2 years, ma'am, maybe longer. The other Germans were eating now, too. Slowly at first, then faster. Tears on their faces, too. The kind of crying that comes when you didn't know how hungry you were until food appeared. Helen served the coffee, strong and hot. Friedrich added cream and sugar, watching the dark liquid turn golden brown. He stirred slowly, lifted the cup, let the steam warm his face. Sipped. Real coffee, the first in years. The warmth spread through his chest like hope he'd forgotten existed. Thank you, he said. His English was heavily accented but clear. Thank you, God. You believe in God, God? Robert asked, surprised. Of course, my father is Lutheran pastor. But you're... Robert stopped, unsure how to phrase it. German, Friedrich finished. Yes, also Christian. We have churches, Christmas, Easter. We are not so different as how you think. Helen set down the coffee pot harder than she meant. The sound made everyone look up. This German U-boat commander, crying over breakfast, saying grace, talking about his pastor father. Tommy had believed in God too. Tommy had gone to church every Sunday before he enlisted. The Germans ate like starving men because they were. They'd been on short rations for months. Real butter seemed like a miracle. Fresh eggs tasted like something from before the war ruined everything. What's Germany like? Robert asked between bites. Friedrich described Hamburg. The Elbe River, the Christmas markets with lights and shake and roasted chestnuts, the ships in the harbor, the beer gardens in summer. You have Christmas markets? Helen asked, shocked despite herself. Of course, very beautiful. My mother loved them. Loved? Morrison asked gently. She died in 1940, pneumonia. Friedrich's voice went quiet. I was at sea, did not make it home. Silence at the table. Even Robert understood what that meant. This enemy combatant across from them had lost his mother while serving. Just like Helen had lost her brother. Just like everyone had lost someone. The bacon brought them back. Simple, present, real. Friedrich took another bite, closed his eyes again. Let the taste ground him in this moment. This is very good, he said. Thank you. Do you have baseball in Germany? Robert asked, desperate to lighten the mood. Baseball. Friedrich looked confused. No, is this American game? The American game, Robert said. I play third base. My cousin played, Friedrich said, suddenly remembering. Before war. He went to America in 1938, played for New York Yankees. How do you say farm team? Farm team? Robert's face lit up. Really, what position? Outfield, I think. He wrote letters about it, was very happy there. Suddenly they had common ground, language they could both speak, baseball, the universal American dialect. Morrison watched all of this unfold, watched his wife's anger slowly dissolve, watched his son connect with an enemy sailor over batting averages and stolen bases, watched Friedrich Weber transform from U-boat commander to homesick young man who missed his dead mother and remembered his cousin's letters from America. This was the real weapon. Not bombs or bullets or propaganda. This, bacon and eggs and treating enemies like humans. After breakfast, Robert had an idea. Want to see how Americans play baseball? He asked Friedrich. Yes. They went to the backyard. Robert brought his glove and a worn ball. He taught Friedrich how to throw, how to catch, the basics. Friedrich was terrible at it. The ball went everywhere except where he aimed. But he laughed. For the first time in years, he laughed with pure joy. Helen watched from the kitchen window. Watch this German who might have killed her brother playing catch with her son. Watch them both smile. She started crying, but different tears this time. That evening after the Germans left, Friedrich sat in his barracks bunk and wrote a letter. Dear Father, he began in German. They fed us breakfast today, real bacon and eggs. A Canadian woman whose brother we probably killed. She served us like guests, like humans. They told us Americans were monsters. They lied to us about everything. The food was better than our Navy gave us. The family was kinder than anyone has been in 3 years. The boy taught me baseball. Father, if this is how they treat their enemies, what have we been fighting for? What have I been doing for 3 years? Everything you quietly doubted was right. Everything they taught us was lies. I don't know what to do with this knowledge, but I had to tell you because you were right about all of it. He sealed the letter. The Red Cross would deliver it eventually. Maybe. If his father was still alive, if Hamburg still stood. But Friedrich had to write it, had to tell someone, had to confess that he'd just eaten the best breakfast of his life from people he'd been trained to hate. And that breakfast had broken something in him. Or maybe fixed something. He wasn't sure yet. All he knew was that bacon tasted like truth. And truth was harder to swallow than 3 years of propaganda. While Friedrich wrote his letter across Halifax, Marcus Johnson was getting ready for Saturday night. The Starlight Ballroom was hosting a dance. Live band, open to all Allied servicemen. Marcus had his best shirt pressed, his shoes shined, his baseball glove tucked in his locker at base waiting for Sunday's game with the Canadians. He'd been in Halifax 3 months now. 3 months of freedom he'd never known in America. 3 months of eating where he wanted, sitting where he wanted, being treated like a man instead of a problem. But Sergeant Craddock was still there, still watching, still trying to restore order. Marcus had seen Craddock drive past the Morrison house that morning, had seen him stop, had seen the fury on his face when he spotted what was happening in the backyard. A black American GI and a German POW, both at a white Canadian family's breakfast table. The world was going mad, Craddock thought. Germans getting bacon while coloreds played baseball with whites. Someone had to fix this. Someone had to remind everyone how things were supposed to be. Saturday night at the Starlight Ballroom, Craddock would make his stand. But first, Marcus had a date to dance. Emma McLeod, the red-haired nurse who'd smiled at him at the hospital. Who'd said yes when he asked if she'd be at the Starlight on Saturday. Who made him believe that maybe, just maybe, some things really were different here. The summer sun set slowly over Halifax Harbor. The foghorns called across the water. Ships prepared for the deadly Atlantic crossing. Somewhere in the barracks, German prisoners tried to sleep while dreaming of bacon. Somewhere in the city, a sergeant planned to restore order by any means necessary. And somewhere between all of that, 2 soldiers, who should have been enemies, had shared a breakfast that would change their lives forever. In 15 minutes, the Starlight Ballroom would fill with music and laughter. In 90 minutes, 50 Canadians would do something unprecedented in North American history. But first, you need to understand what Sergeant Craddock had lost. Because hatred doesn't come from nowhere. It grows from wounds that never healed. And Craddock's wound was still bleeding 3,000 miles from Pearl Harbor, where his brother Johnny died in the arms of a black sailor who tried to save him. The bacon was just beginning to work its magic, but the real test was coming, and Halifax would have to choose whose side they were on when the battle finally arrived. The Starlight Ballroom sat on Spring Garden Road, a second-floor dance hall with windows that overlooked the street. Saturday nights you could hear the music 3 blocks away, swing jazz, big band sound, the kind of rhythm that made even old men want to move. July 7, 1942, 8 p.m., the ballroom filled fast. 200 people, maybe more. American soldiers mixing with Canadian civilians, sailors on shore leave. Factory workers still in their Saturday best. Women in dresses that swirled when they spun. The smell of perfume and hair oil and summer sweat and hope. The band played In the Mood. 6 pieces. Trumpet, sax, drum, bass, piano, clarinet. The wooden floor vibrated under the feet of dancers. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting moving shadows across faces flushed with exertion and joy. Marcus Johnson stood near the bar, drinking Coca-Cola watching. He'd never been to a real dance in America. In Chicago, there were Negro dance halls and white dance halls, and never the two should meet. Here, nobody seemed to care. White Canadians danced with Black American GIs. Nobody whispered. Nobody stared. Emma McLeod found him at 8:15, red hair pinned up off her neck, green dress that matched her eyes. She was a nurse at the military hospital, 21 years old. She'd seen enough wounded men to know that skin color didn't matter when blood was blood. "You came," she said. "I did. Are you going to stand here all night, or are you going to dance with me?" Marcus's hands went cold. In Mississippi, this would get him killed. In Georgia, they'd burn down the hall. In Alabama, they'd lynch him before the song ended. But this was Canada. "I'd be honored," he said. They walked onto the floor. The band shifted to something slower. "I'll be seeing you." Emma put her hand on Marcus's shoulder. He placed his hand on her waist, keeping it respectful proper. They moved together, finding the rhythm. For 2 minutes, Marcus Johnson felt like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. Across the room, Corporal Samuel Washington was dancing with a different Canadian woman. 23 years old from Georgia, he'd never imagined this could happen. White woman, asking him to dance, smiling at him, treating him normal. The song ended. Another started. Sing, sing, sing. Faster tempo. The trumpet wailed. The drums thundered. The floor shook. That's when Sergeant William Craddock walked in. 4 military police with him, nightsticks on their belts, faces set hard. They stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the room. Craddock's eyes found what they were looking for. Black soldiers, dancing with white women. The world going to hell right in front of him. Craddock had driven past the Morrison house that morning, seen it with his own eyes. A German U-boat commander killer of Americans eating breakfast with a white Canadian family, playing baseball in their backyard, laughing, and a black GI there too, sitting at the same table, like everyone was equal, like the natural order of things didn't matter anymore. Now this, colored troops dancing with white civilians, in public, without shame. Someone had to restore order. Someone had to remember what they were fighting for, what his brother Johnny had died for. Craddock crossed the dance floor, boots heavy on the wood. The music kept playing, but dancers started to notice, started to move aside. The energy in the room shifted from joy to tension in the space of 10 seconds. He reached Samuel Washington mid-spin, grabbed his shoulder, yanked him away from his dance partner hard enough that Washington stumbled. "You're under arrest," Craddock said. Washington caught his balance, confusion on his face. "Sir, for what?" "Fraternizing with white civilians, causing a disturbance, being somewhere you don't belong." The music stopped. The whole ballroom went silent. 200 people watching now. The Canadian woman Washington had been dancing with stepped forward. Mary Sullivan, 22 years old. Father was a fisherman. She'd lived in Halifax her whole life, and she'd never been one to back down. "He wasn't causing anything," Mary said. Her voice cut clear across the silent room. "We were dancing. That's not a crime." "Stay out of this, miss," Craddock said without looking at her. "This is my country, my dance hall, my business." Now Craddock looked at her, saw a slip of a woman maybe 5'2", face flushed with anger. "Military matter, not your concern. Everything that happens in Halifax is my concern." The other 3 MPs moved in. They grabbed Washington's arms, started pulling him toward the door. Washington didn't resist. He knew better. Black men who fought white police didn't survive the encounter even in Canada. Marcus watched from across the room, felt Emma's hand tighten on his arm. Wanted to do something, anything. But what could he do? They'd arrest him too, beat him too. Then Ian McLeod stepped into the MP's path. Emma's older brother, dock worker, 35 years old, hands hardened from loading ships 12 hours a day. He'd been leaning against the bar, watching, getting angrier by the second. "Let him go," Ian said. "Move aside," the lead MP said. "This is military business. This is our dance hall, in our city, in our country." More Canadians moved forward, one, then three, then 10, factory workers, sailors, women in their Saturday dresses, old men who remembered the First War. They didn't plan it, didn't organize it, just moved together like a tide responding to the moon. 20 people, 30, forming a wall between the MPs and the door. "You're not taking him," someone said. "He didn't do anything wrong," another voice added. "This is Canada. We don't do that here." Craddock's face went purple. "Stand aside or you'll all be arrested." "On what charge?" Ian asked. "Dancing, interfering with military police." "You're American military. You've got no authority over Canadian civilians." The crowd pressed closer. Not violent, not threatening, just there, immovable. A human fence made of people who'd decided that enough was enough. Craddock looked around. 50 Canadians now, maybe more, surrounding him and his MPs, surrounding Washington. The exit blocked by bodies. For the first time in his life, William Craddock felt outnumbered in a way that had nothing to do with guns or authority. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Actually," Ian said, "I think it is." The MPs dragged Washington outside anyway. The crowd followed, poured out of the Starlight Ballroom like water through a broken dam. The street filled with people. The military police car sat at the curb. The MPs pushed Washington toward it. The crowd surrounded the car, front, back, sides, everywhere. They didn't chant, didn't shout, just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, blocking every direction. 10 minutes passed, nobody moved. The summer night hung warm and still. Fireflies blinked in the darkness. The smell of the harbor drifted up from 3 blocks away. Washington stood by the car, hands trembling. He'd never seen white people do this. Never imagined it was possible. These Canadians were risking arrest, maybe worse for him. A black American soldier they'd never met before tonight. Then Halifax police arrived. 2 officers in Canadian uniforms. Constable Thomas Reed, 28, 6 years on the force. Sergeant Duncan O'Malley, 44, 20 years of seeing everything Halifax had to offer. O'Malley surveyed the scene. 50-plus civilians surrounding an American military police car. 4 American MPs looking desperate. 1 black soldier standing quiet and dignified in the middle of it all. "What seems to be the problem?" O'Malley asked. Craddock turned to him like a drowning man seeing a life preserver. "These civilians are interfering with a military arrest. I need you to clear them." "What's the charge?" "Fraternizing with white civilians, creating a disturbance." O'Malley looked at Washington, looked at the crowd, looked back at Craddock. "That's not against Canadian law. It's military law. Not on our streets it isn't." O'Malley's voice stayed level, professional, but something underneath it had the weight of finality. "I can't help you arrest someone who hasn't broken our laws. This is military jurisdiction." "No, Sergeant, it's not. This is Halifax, Canadian soil, and fraternizing isn't illegal here. Dancing isn't illegal. Being black in public isn't illegal." O'Malley paused. "Let the soldier go." The crowd erupted, cheering, clapping, some crying with relief. Mary Sullivan pushed through and took Washington's hand. Emma found Marcus in the crowd and squeezed his arm so hard it hurt. Craddock had no choice. He released Washington, got in the car. The crowd parted just enough to let the vehicle through. As the MPs drove away, the cheering got louder. Mrs. Catherine O'Brien appeared in the doorway of the Starlight Ballroom. 43 years old. She'd run this place for 15 years. Her husband Patrick was fighting in Italy. She needed American soldiers' money to keep the doors open. But she'd made a choice weeks ago, and she wasn't backing down now. "Everyone back inside," she called. "Drinks on the house." The celebration moved back into the ballroom. The band started playing again. But something had changed. Everyone felt it. A line had been crossed. A stand had been taken. Halifax had chosen its side. The next morning, Sunday, July 12th, Captain Morrison had an idea. He'd heard about the Starlight incident. Everyone had. The story spread through Halifax like fire through dry grass. Canadians standing up to American MPs, refusing to enforce segregation, choosing dignity over cooperation with a powerful ally. Morrison wanted to push it further. I'm inviting more soldiers to breakfast, he told Helen, both the German prisoners and some of the colored American troops. Helen looked at him. Together. James, I know what I'm asking, but these boys need to see each other as human. The Germans need to understand that America's real strength isn't segregation, and the colored troops need to see that not everyone thinks like their own MPs. And what do we need to see? Helen asked quietly. Morrison took her hand. That breaking bread together is more powerful than all the propaganda in the world. So Helen made bacon again. Twice as much this time. 6 strips per person instead of 3. The whole kitchen filled with that maple smoke smell. Friedrich Weber returned with 2 other German prisoners. Marcus Johnson came with 2 friends from his unit. Robert Morrison set the table for 10 people. The most unlikely breakfast party in Halifax history. They arrived within minutes of each other. The Germans nervous, the Black Americans uncertain. Marcus and Friedrich saw each other across the Morrison living room and stopped. Enemy combatant. That's what they were supposed to see. But Friedrich remembered the baseball game from last week, remembered Robert's laughter, remembered Helen's kindness despite her grief. And Marcus remembered the stories he'd heard. German prisoners treated well, fed good food, shown basic human decency while he got beaten outside the Carlton Hotel for trying to eat dinner. Morrison made introductions. Kapitän Leutnant Friedrich Weber. This is Private Marcus Johnson. Marcus Friedrich. They shook hands, awkward at first, then firmer. Chicago, Marcus said. Hamburg, Friedrich replied. Long way from home. Both of us. Helen called them to the table. 10 people sat down. 3 Germans who'd been hunting Allied convoys. 3 Black Americans who'd been loading ships to stop them. 1 American captain, 1 Canadian woman, 1 16-year-old boy, and enough bacon to feed an army. The smell rose from the plates in waves. Thick strips perfectly cooked, fat glistening. Scrambled eggs fluffy and golden. Toast with butter melting into every pore. Coffee steaming, the preserves catching morning light through the window. Friedrich took his first bite, and the memory of last week's breakfast flooded back. That same taste. That same feeling of being cared for. Being seen as human instead of enemy. Marcus took his first bite and something shifted in his chest. This was the bacon that had transformed a German U-boat commander. He could taste why. Not just the food itself, but what it represented. Someone taking time to cook properly, to serve with dignity, to say without words that you matter. For a few minutes, nobody spoke, just the sounds of eating, of coffee being poured, of butter knives on toast, of 10 people sharing a meal that shouldn't have been possible. Then Robert broke the silence. Marcus pitches baseball. Friedrich's cousin played for the Yankees farm team. The 2 soldiers looked at each other. You play? Friedrich asked. Chicago's South Side League, Marcus said. I am terrible. Robert taught me last week I throw like, how do you say like girl? Marcus laughed, actually laughed. Want to try again after breakfast? You would teach me. Why not? Enemy of my enemy is my friend. Helen watched this unfold. Watched these 2 men who should have hated each other bonding over baseball. Watched her son beam with pride at bringing them together. Watched her husband's plan work exactly as he'd hoped. The conversation opened up. Careful at first, then easier. What's Germany like? One of the black soldiers asked. Friedrich described Hamburg. The Christmas markets, the Elbe River, the beer gardens before the war. Sounds like Chicago, Marcus said. Different language, same cold winters, same big river through the middle. They told us Americans were barbarians, Friedrich said quietly. Inferior people, mixed races making weak nation. Silence at the table. The Black Americans stiffened. And, Marcus asked, voice hard. Friedrich looked at him, really looked. And they lied. About everything. This bacon is better than anything Germany gave us in 3 years. This family is kinder than my own officers. And you, he gestured at Marcus, you throw baseball better than any German I know. Marcus relaxed slightly. They told us Germans were monsters, evil, inhuman. And you cry when you eat bacon. Monsters don't cry. One of the other Germans spoke up. In submarine, we had Russian prisoner once. From ship, we sank. Officers said he was subhuman, communist animal, but he helped us fix engine when we were damaged. Saved all our lives. The sailor paused. He died when depth charge hit. I think of him sometimes. Wonder if propaganda lied about Russians too. They lied about everything, Marcus said. They tell me I'm inferior because I'm black. Can't lead, can't think, can't fight. But I load more ammunition than any white soldier in my unit. I pitch better than anyone. I'm not inferior. I'm just not wanted. Friedrich set down his coffee cup. Last week after breakfast, I wrote letter to my father. Told him everything they taught us was lies. Told him Americans fed us better than our own Navy. Treated us better than our own officers. What did he say? Helen asked. I don't know. Letter maybe takes months. Maybe never arrives. Maybe he is dead. Friedrich's voice cracked. But I had to tell someone. Had to confess that I spent 3 years fighting for propaganda while the truth was bacon and eggs. Marcus reached across the table, held out his hand. Friedrich took it. We're the same, Marcus said. Was fighting for countries that lied to us. Both discovering the truth tastes like maple. They shook on it, enemy combatants becoming brothers over breakfast. After the meal, they went to the backyard. Robert brought baseball equipment. They formed teams, mixed. Germans and Americans together. Marcus pitched. Friedrich swung and missed. Swung again and connected. Base hit. Everyone cheered. One of the other black soldiers hit a home run. Everyone cheered again, Germans included. They played for an hour, laughing, trash-talking in 2 languages, teaching each other American slang and German curses. Helen watched from the kitchen window, saw men who should have been killing each other playing like children, saw the war pause for one morning in her backyard, saw what the world could be if more people made bacon for their enemies. Across the street, hidden in a parked car, Sergeant William Craddock watched too. He'd been driving past, saw the gathering, stopped to observe. Now he sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching everything he believed crumble into dust. German prisoners, black American soldiers, white Canadian family, all together, eating breakfast, playing baseball, laughing. The memory of his brother Johnny surfaced. The letter Johnny had written from Pearl Harbor. The words Craddock had tried to forget for 8 months. A colored sailor pulled me out of the water. Seaman Wilson, I was burning. He dove in and got me out. Maybe Daddy was wrong about colored folks. This man risked his life for mine. Johnny had survived Pearl Harbor because a black sailor saved him. Then Johnny died 3 days later from infection. But those 3 days he'd talked about Wilson, about how brave he was, how strong, how he didn't see color when he saw a drowning sailor. Craddock had been furious, at Wilson for confusing Johnny, at Johnny for questioning everything they'd been raised to believe, at Gunn for letting Johnny die just when he was starting to doubt the natural order. Now Craddock watched a German and a black American shake hands over baseball, watched them laugh together, watched them treat each other like humans. What if Johnny was right? What if the black sailor really was brave? What if Germans weren't all monsters? What if everything Craddock had spent 34 years believing was a lie? The steering wheel creaked under his grip. His breath came fast and shallow. Something was breaking inside him. Some wall he'd built to protect himself from doubt. He started the car, drove away before anyone saw him, before he had to confront what he was feeling. That evening, Morrison found him. Craddock was in a bar near the base, drinking alone. Morrison walked in still in uniform and sat down next to him. I saw your car this morning, Morrison said, outside my house. Craddock didn't look at him. So you watched. You saw what happened. I saw chaos, natural order being destroyed. Morrison ordered a whiskey, waited until it came, drank half of it. Your brother was Johnny Craddock, Pearl Harbor survivor, died December 10th, 1941 from infection. Craddock's head snapped up. How do you know that? I'm a doctor. I read medical records. I know Seaman Wilson pulled him from the water. I know Johnny spent his last 3 days talking about it, about how a colored sailor saved his life. Silence. The bar noise faded to background hum. Johnny saw something you can't, Morrison continued. He saw that we're all just people. That skin color doesn't matter when someone's drowning. That courage looks the same on every man. He was confused, in shock from the burns. He was clear, clearer than he'd ever been, and it scared you. Morrison finished his whiskey. It scared you because if he was right, then everything you believe is wrong. Craddock's hands shook. I saw you feed Germans this morning. Men who kill Americans, while you defend coloreds against their own military police. How can you do both? Because I treat everyone like humans. The Germans killed my wife's brother. The colored soldiers load the ships that keep Britain alive. Both deserve bacon and eggs. Both deserve dignity. That's not complicated. It's just hard for people who've been taught to hate. I don't hate. I just believe in order, in proper structure, in lies, Morrison interrupted. The same lies they told those German boys. The same lies they told Marcus Johnson. You know what I learned this morning? German propaganda told them Americans were inferior mongrels. American propaganda tells colored troops they're inferior soldiers. Same lie, different accent. Craddock put his head in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What if I've been wrong about everything? Then you get to choose. Keep being wrong or start being right. Morrison stood up. Put money on the bar. Seaman Wilson is stationed at Norfolk. I have his address. If you want to thank him for saving your brother, I can get it to you. He left Craddock sitting there, staring at his drink, feeling his entire worldview fracture like thin ice under heavy weight. The next morning, Monday, July 13th, the Halifax Chronicle published a front-page story. Canadians defy us military police, not in our city. The article detailed everything. The Carlton Hotel incident, the Starlight Ballroom siege, the 50 Canadians surrounding the police car, Sergeant O'Malley refusing to help American MPs. It quoted Mayor Alan McKenzie, Canadian businesses will not segregate on orders from foreign military police. We welcome all allied servicemen to our city. We will not participate in policies that contradict our values. The story spread, first across Nova Scotia, then across Canada, then into American newspapers, then across the Atlantic to Britain. Nazi propaganda picked it up immediately. Radio Berlin crowed about American hypocrisy. They claimed to fight for freedom while denying it to their own soldiers. But the propaganda backfired. German POWs in camps across Canada heard the broadcasts, started questioning if the Nazis were telling the truth about American segregation, but lying about American brutality toward prisoners. What else were they lying about? The cracks in the propaganda wall widened. 20 years later, those cracks would become chasms. Jackson, Mississippi, summer 1962. Marcus Johnson stood on a picket line outside the county courthouse. 42 years old, gray touching his temples, hands scarred from 20 years of lumber mill work. The sign he carried said, "All men are created equal." Across the street, white supremacists shouted, threatened. Someone threw a rock. It hit Marcus's shoulder, bounced off. He didn't move. Inside his shirt pocket, he carried a photograph, worn from being handled, creased at the edges. The image showed a backyard baseball game in Halifax, 1942. Marcus and Friedrich Weber, arms around each other's shoulders, both holding gloves, both grinning. On the back, in faded ink, enemies became brothers over bacon. July 12, 1942. Marcus touched the photograph through his shirt, drew strength from it. Because if a German U-boat commander and a black American GI could eat breakfast together and play baseball and become friends, then segregation wasn't natural law. It was a choice, and choices could be unmade. That night, someone burned a cross in his yard. The next week, someone shot bullets through his living room window. His wife, Sarah, begged him to stop, to keep quiet, to stay safe. But Marcus couldn't, because he'd tasted freedom in 1942. He'd seen what the world could be. He'd eaten bacon with an enemy and discovered they were the same. I have to keep going, he told Sarah. Friedrich wrote me a letter last year. He's teaching now in Hamburg, shows his students the photo of us, tells them propaganda is lies. If he can do that in Germany, I can do this in Mississippi. Sarah held him. That bacon's going to get you killed. That bacon already saved my life. By September 1962, Marcus had registered 300 black voters. By 1965, he'd helped desegregate 2 lunch counters. By 1970, his daughter was attending integrated schools. The bacon kept working its magic. 20 years after the meal that changed him. Back in Halifax, September 1942, the new normal settled in. The Starlight Ballroom stayed integrated. Mrs. O'Brien kept her All Allied Forces welcome sign in the window. She lost some business. White soldiers who disagreed stayed away, but she kept the doors open, kept the music playing, kept saying no to hatred. The Carlton Hotel never segregated. Mr. Sullivan's letter to the newspaper had made him a local hero. Black American soldiers ate there every night. Germans POWs too, when they had permission for town leave. The Morrison family hosted Sunday breakfast every week through the fall. 10 people, 12, sometimes 15. Mixed groups. German prisoners, Black American GIs, white American officers starting to question their own assumptions, Canadian civilians who wanted to help. The bacon kept coming. The baseball games continued. The conversations got deeper. Friedrich Weber and Marcus Johnson became actual friends. They wrote letters, talked about their hopes for after the war, shared stories about home, found that Hamburg and Chicago weren't so different, that their fathers would have liked each other, that they'd both joined the military for adventure and found only the grinding machinery of war. Sergeant Craddock disappeared from Halifax in late July, quietly reassigned, no announcement, no explanation. He just stopped appearing on the streets. But before he left, he did one thing. He wrote to Captain Morrison, asked for Seaman Wilson's address. Morrison provided it. What happened after that, nobody knew. But 6 months later, Morrison got a letter from Georgia, from Craddock. I met him, Wilson. We had coffee. I thanked him for saving Johnny. He cried, said he tried but couldn't save him from the infection. I told him Johnny's last days were peaceful because of him. We talked for 3 hours. About Johnny, about the war, about everything. He's a good man. You were right. About all of it. I don't know how to undo what I did in Halifax, but I'm trying to be different. Trying to see what Johnny saw. The bacon was right. That's what I learned. The bacon was right about everything. Morrison showed the letter to Helen. She read it twice, then said, maybe we should make more bacon. So they did, every Sunday, through 1942, through 1943, through 1904, through the end of the war, and every strip of bacon they served was an act of rebellion against propaganda, against hatred, against the lie that some people deserved dignity and others didn't. The bacon kept working, slowly, quietly, one breakfast at a time. But the real test was still coming, because wars end. Soldiers go home. And the question everyone was asking was simple but profound. Would the lessons of the bacon survive the peace, August 1945? The war ended with 2 atomic bombs and a surrender signed on a battleship deck. The world exhaled, the killing stopped, and soldiers started going home. Friedrich Weber stood at Halifax Harbor with 300 other German prisoners waiting to board the ship that would take them back to Europe, back to whatever remained of Germany, back to ruins and guilt in the long process of rebuilding a nation that had tried to destroy the world. He carried a baseball glove, the one Marcus had given him in 1943, worn leather, shaped to his hand from 2 years of Sunday games. Robert Morrison had taught him how to throw a curveball. Marcus had taught him how to slide into second base. The glove held those memories better than any photograph. Helen Morrison came to see him off. She brought something wrapped in wax paper. I know it's a long journey, she said. Made you some sandwiches. Friedrich unwrapped one corner. Bacon, the same thick-cut maple cured strips she'd served him every Sunday for 3 years. Cold now, but still fragrant with smoke and sweetness. His vision blurred. Mrs. Morrison, thank you for everything, for the breakfast that saved my soul. You saved mine too, Helen said quietly. Tommy would have wanted me to feed you. Took me a while to understand that, but he would have. They embraced. This woman whose brother he might have killed. This woman who'd shown him what real Christianity looked like. Not propaganda, not nationalism, just bacon and eggs and treating enemies like humans. Will you write? She asked. Every month, I promise. And Marcus, will you write to him too? We already promised. America or Germany doesn't matter. We're brothers now. The ship's horn sounded. Time to board. Friedrich climbed the gangway with his baseball glove and his bacon sandwiches, and 3 years of memories that felt more real than the 6 years of war that preceded them. He ate the bacon sandwiches during the crossing, slowly, making them last, each bite a reminder that propaganda dies but kindness survives. The ship landed in Hamburg, or what remained of Hamburg. The city Friedrich remembered from childhood had been bombed into rubble. Entire neighborhoods gone. The Christmas markets he described to Robert Morrison were ashes. The beer gardens were craters. The Elbe River still flowed, but everything around it had been destroyed. His father had survived. Older now, thinner, but alive. They embraced on the dock for 5 minutes without speaking. That night, in what remained of their house, Friedrich told him everything. About the bacon, about Helen Morrison feeding him despite her brother's death, about playing baseball with a black American soldier, about learning that everything the propaganda had taught them was lies. His father cried, "I tried to tell you, quietly, carefully, but I was too afraid to say it clearly." "You said enough," Friedrich replied. "I just had to taste the bacon to understand." Marcus Johnson's train rolled into Jackson, Mississippi on a Tuesday afternoon in November 1945. The platform was segregated, colored waiting room on one side, white on the other, signs everywhere reminding him of his place. He'd been gone 4 years. 4 years of loading ships in Halifax. 4 years of breathing Canadian air. 3 months of tasting what freedom felt like before Sergeant Craddock tried to take it away. 3 years of Sunday breakfasts with Germans and Canadians and anyone else who wanted bacon and dignity. Now he was back in Jim Crow country. The train ride from New York had shown him the transition. Somewhere around Virginia, the signs appeared. Whites only. Colored section. Separate but equal, the law said. Separate unless reality whispered. His mother met him at the colored entrance. She'd aged in 4 years, gray in her hair, lines around her eyes. But her hug was the same. Strong, fierce, full of relief that her baby had come home alive. "Did it change you?" she asked as they walked to the colored taxi stand. "Yes, Mama." Good change or bad change? Marcus thought about Friedrich Weber crying over bacon, about Helen Morrison serving breakfast to men who killed her brother, about 50 Canadians surrounding a police car to protect him, about baseball games in backyards where everyone was equal. "Good change," he said. "I know what's possible now, and I can't unknow it." She squeezed his hand. "That sounds dangerous, baby." "It is, but I lived in freedom once, even for just a few months. I can't pretend it doesn't exist." Marcus got a job at a lumber mill, married his high school sweetheart Sarah, had 3 children, worked hard, kept his head down. But he wrote letters to Friedrich every month, and Friedrich wrote back. The letters crossed the Atlantic like threads connecting two men who should have remained enemies. Friedrich described rebuilding Hamburg, training as a teacher, starting to work at a gymnasium, teaching English and history, showing his students the photograph of the baseball game, telling them about the breakfast that changed his life. Marcus described Mississippi, the segregation that got worse, not better after the war, the lunch counters he couldn't sit at, the schools his children couldn't attend, the voting registration he was denied. But also the hope, the small victories, the slow, grinding work of change. In 1947, Friedrich got married. In 1948, Marcus's first child was born. In 1950, they both became fathers within 3 months of each other. The letters included photos now. Friedrich's blonde daughter, Marcus's brown son. Both men marveling at how similar children looked regardless of where they were born. "My daughter asked about the baseball glove," Friedrich wrote in 1952. "I told her it came from a friend in America, an enemy who became a brother. She said, 'That's silly, Papa. How can someone be both?' I told her that's the whole point. Everyone is both until we choose which one matters more." In 1955, Marcus wrote, "I showed my son the photograph, the one of us playing baseball in Mrs. Morrison's yard. He said, 'Daddy, that white man is your friend.' I said, 'Yes.' He said, 'But white people are mean to us.' I said, 'Not all of them. Not the ones who choose bacon over hatred.' He didn't understand. But someday he will." The letters continued through the 50s, through Friedrich's career as a teacher, through Marcus's quiet resistance in Mississippi, through both men watching their children grow. Through the long, slow work of trying to make the world more like that Halifax backyard and less like the propaganda that had shaped them. Then came 1962. Marcus stood on that picket line in Jackson. The rock hit his shoulder. He didn't move. That night he wrote to Friedrich, "I'm doing what you did in 1942, standing between bad men and good people, trying to show that propaganda is lies. They burned a cross in my yard last week. Sarah wants me to stop, but I can't, because I remember the bacon, and the bacon was worth dying for." Friedrich wrote back immediately, "The bacon was worth living for too. Don't let them kill you, my friend. The world needs more men who've tasted freedom. Fewer martyrs, more teachers. Stay alive and tell the story." Marcus stayed alive, barely, through the violence of the civil rights movement, through the threats and the burnings and the shootings. He registered voters, desegregated lunch counters, marched, organized. And every time he wanted to quit, he touched the photograph in his pocket, the one of him and Friedrich playing baseball, the one that proved enemies could become brothers. In Hamburg, Friedrich taught a generation of German students about propaganda, about how the Nazis had lied about everything, about how Americans weren't mongrels but people, about how he'd learned this truth over bacon and eggs served by a grieving woman who chose kindness over revenge. "My students don't always believe me," he wrote to Marcus in 1968. "They think I'm exaggerating. So I show them the photograph, show them the baseball glove, read them your letters. Then they understand. The bacon was real, the friendship was real, the propaganda was the lie." By 1970, they'd been writing for 25 years, a quarter century of letters, sharing children's graduations, mourning parents' deaths, celebrating grandchildren, supporting each other through struggles, always ending the letters the same way. "We should meet again." But it never happened. Too expensive, too far, too complicated. Life got in the way until 1975. Friedrich was 61 years old, retiring from teaching after 27 years. His final class sat before him on a Wednesday in May. 40 students who'd heard every story, who'd seen the photographs so many times they'd memorized every detail. "Herr Weber," one student asked, "whatever happened to Marcus, the baseball player?" Friedrich looked at the photograph on his desk, worn now from handling, faded from light, but still clear enough to see two young men with their arms around each other's shoulders, both grinning, both holding baseball gloves. "I don't know," Friedrich admitted. "We write letters, but we haven't seen each other in 33 years. "You should find him," the student said, "before it's too late." That night, Friedrich wrote a different kind of letter, not the usual monthly update, something more urgent. "Marcus, my friend, I'm retiring. I have some money saved, and I'm coming to America. November, 30 years too late, but I'm coming." The letter reached Mississippi 2 weeks later. Marcus read it 3 times, then showed it to his grandchildren who were visiting. "Is this the German man from the picture?" his grandson asked. 10 years old, bright eyes, curious about everything. "Yes." "Is he really coming here?" "To Canada, Halifax, where we met. Can we go too?" Marcus looked at Sarah. She'd stood by him through the worst of the civil rights violence, through the crosses and the bullets and the fear. She'd earned a say in this. "Go," she said. "See your friend. Finish the story." So Marcus bought a plane ticket, his first time flying. 55 years old, and he'd never been on an airplane. The world had changed since 1942. The Canadian government organized it all. 30th anniversary of the war's end, special program reuniting veterans with former prisoners. They invited Marcus and Friedrich, the Morrison family, other Germans and Americans who'd met in Halifax during those years. The morning of November 15, 1975, Marcus Johnson stood in Halifax Airport, gray at his temples now, hands scarred from 30 years of lumber work, but the same man who'd eaten bacon with an enemy in 1942. He watched the passengers come through arrivals, looking for a face he had only seen in photographs for 33 years. Then Friedrich walked through the gate, 61 years old, hair white, spectacles on his nose, carrying the same worn baseball glove. They saw each other across the crowded terminal. Time collapsed. 33 years disappeared. They were young again, eating bacon, playing baseball. discovering that enemies were just friends who hadn't met yet. Marcus crossed the terminal. Friedrich dropped his bag. They embraced in the middle of the crowd, both crying, no words for 30 seconds. Just holding on to proof that friendship survives everything. Finally, Marcus stepped back, looked at the glove. "You kept it." "Always," Friedrich said. His German accent was thicker with emotion. "You taught me baseball. How could I let it go?" "I kept the photo, showed it to everyone, used it to prove that change is possible." They stood there grinning like idiots. Two old men who'd been young soldiers once, who'd shared a breakfast that changed their lives, who'd spent 30 years proving that one meal mattered more than 6 years of war. Helen Morrison appeared through the crowd, 76 years old now. Widow, Robert had taken over the house, but she still lived there. Still made bacon every Sunday out of habit and hope. She saw them. These two men she'd fed so many times. These two enemies she'd turned into brothers. She walked over slowly, leaning on a cane, but moving with purpose. Friedrich and Marcus turned, recognized her. Both started crying again. They did a three-way embrace, right there in Halifax Airport. German, American, Canadian, holding each other, all remembering bacon and baseball and the summer when everything changed. "I made breakfast this morning," Helen said, "just in case." "The same?" Friedrich asked. "Exactly the same." They went to the Morrison house. Robert was there, 49 years old now. He'd become a lawyer, married, had his own children, but he'd kept his father's tradition. Sunday breakfast for anyone who needed them. The kitchen smelled exactly like 1942. Bacon sizzling in cast iron, coffee percolating, toast browning, the same smells that had changed Friedrich's life 33 years ago. Helen stood at the stove, same position, same fork in hand. The bacon strips curled at the edges, the fat rendered with those small hisses and pops. The maple smoke filled the kitchen like memory made tangible. On the table she'd laid out abundance. Toast, butter, scrambled eggs, fried potatoes. The blueberry preserve she still made every summer. Coffee cups waiting, cream and sugar. Everything exactly as it had been in 1942. Friedrich and Marcus sat at the same table, same chairs, same view of the backyard where they'd played baseball. Helen brought the bacon, 3 strips on each plate, thick, maple cured, still sizzling. They looked at their plates, neither could speak. The moment was too large, too heavy with meaning. 33 years of letters, 33 years of remembering, all leading back to this, the same table, the same bacon, the same love disguised as breakfast. Friedrich took a bite. The taste exploded across his tongue exactly as it had in 1942. Salty, smoky, sweet. The fat melted. The texture was perfect. And suddenly he was 28 again. Defeated, scared, expecting torture, receiving kindness. The tears came without warning. He couldn't stop them. Didn't try. Marcus took a bite, tasted the same thing. The flavor was identical. But layered on top of it was everything that came after. The freedom he'd found here, the hatred he'd faced in Mississippi, the movement he'd joined, the people he'd helped, all of it powered by the memory of this taste, by the proof that dignity was possible. He cried too. Helen watched them. These two old men weeping over bacon, same as the first time, same tears, same breakthrough of walls built by propaganda and pain. Robert brought coffee, poured for everyone. The dark liquid steamed. Friedrich added cream and sugar, watched it swirl and blend, sipped. Perfect, exactly as he remembered. "Mrs. Morrison," Friedrich said, voice breaking, "this bacon, it saved my soul in 1942, and it just did it again." "It gave me hope," Marcus added. "Hope I carried for 30 years. Hope that got me through Mississippi, through violence and hatred. This bacon is worth more than any law." They ate slowly, making it last. The eggs fluffy and rich, the potatoes crispy and soft. The toast perfect with butter soaking in. The preserves sweet and tart. Every bite a memory. Every flavor a proof that love is stronger than propaganda. Helen sat down with them. You know what I realized 30 years ago? I was so angry. Tommy had just died, and James wanted me to feed Germans, feed the men who killed my brother. She paused, looked at both of them. But feeding you healed me more than it healed you, because I learned that grief doesn't have to become hatred, that honoring Tommy meant being who he would have wanted me to be, kind, open, human. You taught us everything, Friedrich said. That breakfast was the first moment I questioned what I'd been taught, the first crack in the propaganda. It was the first time I felt human in America, Marcus said. The first time someone served me like I mattered. Robert spoke up. I was 16 when you first came here. I thought I knew everything. But watching you two become friends taught me more than any school. Taught me that enemies are just a story we tell ourselves. And we can tell a different story. They finished breakfast, sat back, let the food settle, let the moment breathe. Then Robert had an idea. Want to play baseball? Friedrich laughed. I'm 61 years old. I'm 55, Marcus added. My knees are shot. So we'll play slow, Robert said. One more game, for old times. They went to the backyard, the same yard. The grass was different. The trees were taller, but the distance from the house to the back fence was exactly the same. Robert brought equipment, old glove, worn ball, nostalgia and hope wrapped in leather. Marcus took the mound, wound up. His shoulder protested, his back complained, but the muscle memory was there. The ball left his hand in a familiar arc, crossed the plate, cracked into Robert's mitt. Still got it, Robert said. Friedrich stepped up to bat. The glove Marcus had given him sat on the ground nearby. 33 years later, and it was still here, still part of the story. Marcus pitched, a slow one, respectful of age and arthritis. Friedrich swung, connected. The ball sailed into the outfield. Base hit, Robert called. Friedrich jogged to first, out of breath, laughing. 61 years old and playing baseball in Canada with a man who'd been his enemy before Bacon made them brothers. They played for 20 minutes. That's all their bodies could handle. But it was enough to prove that some things survive time. That friendship doesn't fade. That Bacon and baseball can change the world if you let them. Sitting on the porch afterward, drinking lemonade, Marcus asked the question that had been growing in his mind for years. Do you ever regret it, becoming my friend instead of staying my enemy? Friedrich looked at him. Really looked. Regret, Marcus, you're the best thing that came out of the war. You and this family. You taught me that everything I'd been taught was lies. You gave me a reason to rebuild Germany better, to teach students the truth, to make sure another generation doesn't fall for propaganda. The bacon was worth everything, wasn't it? The bacon was worth everything. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over Halifax, the same harbor where their war had ended, where their friendship had begun, where bacon and kindness had defeated hatred and lies. The next 10 years they stayed in contact. Friedrich came to America in 1978, met Marcus's family, saw Mississippi, was shocked by how similar American segregation looked to Nazi propaganda, told Marcus's children about their father's courage, about how he used the memory of Bacon to fuel the civil rights movement. Marcus went to Germany in 1982, met Friedrich's family, saw Hamburg rebuilt, visited Friedrich's classroom, talked to students about propaganda and truth and how one breakfast can change a life. They saw each other every few years, not as often as they'd have liked, but enough to keep the connection strong, to remind themselves why they'd become friends, to taste the bacon of memory. In 1985, Friedrich had a heart attack. Minor, but a warning. He came to America one last time, one final visit to Halifax, one final breakfast at the Morrison House. Helen was 90 years old, still cooking, still making bacon every Sunday, still believing that feeding people was the most powerful political act in the world. The breakfast was exactly the same. Same table, same bacon, same love. This might be the last time, Friedrich said quietly. Then we'll make it count, Marcus replied. They ate slowly, savoring everything. The maple smoke, the crispy edges, the fat melting on their tongues, the coffee rich and hot, the memories flooding back with every bite. After they sat on the porch, watching ships in the harbor. Both old men now. Both shaped by a war they'd fought on opposite sides. Both transformed by bacon they had eaten at the same table. Thank you, Friedrich said, for becoming my friend, for teaching me that enemies are just people we haven't fed yet. Thank you for showing me that Germans can cry over breakfast, that propaganda dies but kindness survives. They shook hands, then embraced. Brothers for 40 years, all because a Canadian woman made bacon for men who should have hated each other. Friedrich died in Hamburg in 1990. Heart failure, 76 years old. He was teaching right up until the end, showing students the photograph, telling them about bacon and baseball and the American soldier who changed his life. Marcus flew to the funeral. First time in Germany, he placed the baseball glove on Friedrich's casket. The same glove. 48 years old, worn smooth, shaped by two hands from different countries. Proof that friendship is stronger than war. At the graveside, 200 former students attended. They'd all heard the story, all seen the photograph, all learned that propaganda is lies and bacon is truth. Marcus gave the eulogy. He was my enemy for 2 years, my friend for 48 years. The bacon was always good, but the friendship was better. He returned to Mississippi, continued his work, registered voters, supported the next generation of activists, showed his grandchildren the photograph, told them about Friedrich, about bacon, about how the world changes one meal at a time. Marcus died in 2018, 98 years old. In his pocket was the photograph, worn thin from handling, but still clear enough to see two young soldiers with their arms around each other. Still proof that enemies can become brothers. His grandson found a shoebox in Marcus's closet. Inside were 300 letters from Friedrich, spanning 50 years, a complete record of a friendship that should have been impossible. The last letter dated 1989, 1 year before Friedrich died. My dear Marcus, we are old men now. The war is ancient history. Our children have children. The world has changed in ways we never imagined. But I still remember the bacon, the first bite, the way it tasted like truth after years of lies. The way Mrs. Morrison served it to me like I was human instead of enemy. That bacon changed everything, didn't it, my friend? Not because it was special bacon, because it was served with love to someone who deserved hatred. We spent 40 years proving that breakfast matters more than war. That kindness defeats propaganda. That bacon and baseball can change the world. Thank you for being my enemy first. It made being your brother so much sweeter. The bacon was worth everything. In May 2019, Halifax held a ceremony. 77 years after that first breakfast, they unveiled two plaques. The first at the Carlton Hotel site, now an office building, but the spot where Marcus's blood had stained the pavement, where Mr. Sullivan had made his stand. In 1942, ordinary Canadians chose dignity over discrimination. They said two words that echo through history, not here. The second at the Morrison House, still standing, still hosting Sunday breakfasts, now run by Robert's daughter. At this table, enemies became friends over bacon and baseball. July 1942 to November 1975. Proving that kindness is stronger than propaganda and breakfast is more powerful than bullets. The bacon was worth everything. Friedrich Weber and Marcus Johnson. At the ceremony, 300 people gathered. Marcus's granddaughter, Keisha, spoke. Friedrich's grandson, Hans, spoke. Robert Morrison's daughter spoke. They told the story. The bacon, the baseball, the letters, the friendship that survived war and distance and 48 years of history. Someone had found the photograph, the original, in Marcus's belongings. It was placed in the Nova Scotia Museum, right next to Friedrich's baseball glove. Artifacts of a friendship that changed the world quietly. One breakfast at a time. The ceremony ended with bacon, of course, prepared exactly as Helen Morrison had made it in 1942. Thick cut, maple cured, served to everyone equally. 300 people ate bacon together. German descendants, American descendants, Canadian descendants, and all connected by two men who'd chosen friendship over hatred, who'd chosen breakfast over war. And the bacon tasted like hope, like proof, like the knowledge that propaganda dies but kindness survives, that enemies are just friends who haven't eaten together yet, that the most powerful weapon isn't a bomb or a bullet, It's a woman saying there's enough for everyone while cooking breakfast for men who should have remained enemies forever. The harbor fog rolled in as it had in 1942. The same salt smell, the same foghorns calling across the water, the same possibility for change. Because Halifax had learned something 77 years ago, something the world keeps forgetting and relearning, something as simple as bacon and as profound as love, that we're all just hungry, that food tastes the same regardless of who's eating it, that serving breakfast to your enemies is more revolutionary than any protest. That kindness defeats hatred every single time if you're patient enough to let it work. Friedrich Weber and Marcus Johnson had been enemies for 2 years, friends for 48 years. And in those 48 years, they taught thousands of people the same lesson. The bacon was right about everything. Propaganda divides, breakfast unites, hatred separates, bacon brings together. And sometimes the most powerful act of resistance is just making sure everyone gets a seat at the table. The foghorns sounded across Halifax Harbor, the same sound from 1942, the same call to remember, the same invitation to choose kindness over hatred, bacon over bullets, friendship over war. Marcus and Friedrich were gone now, but the truth they discovered together remained, written in letters, captured in photographs, baked into the recipe for maple-cured bacon that Helen Morrison had passed down through 3 generations. The truth that every war ends, every enemy returns home. And the only question that matters is this: will you feed them? Will you serve them bacon and eggs? Will you let them cry at your table? Will you play baseball in your backyard with men who killed your brothers? Halifax said yes in 1942. And that yes echoed through 77 years, through civil rights movements, through the fall of the Berlin Wall, through every moment when someone chose to feed an enemy instead of hate them. The bacon kept working its magic, slowly, quietly, one breakfast at a time, because in the end, we're all just people. We're all just hungry. And bacon tastes good regardless of who's eating it. That's the truth Friedrich and Marcus discovered over Helen Morrison's breakfast table in 1942. That's the truth they spent their lives proving. That's the truth that survives them. The bacon was worth everything, and love disguised as breakfast defeats hatred every single time.